We have Jerry Gidel back to our channel. He always talks about corn and soybean prices after the bell rings on Fridays. And this week, he's also going to speak about the September USDA stocks. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe and like us. Jerry Gidel, how are you?
Very good, sir.
So we are closing with November futures for soybeans near $10 a bushel, and corn is slightly below the previous week. How do you analyze that, Jerry?
Well, we've had quite a kind of unprecedented 6-7 weeks of enthusiasm, Chinese buying. It's been a everyday occurrence, and that even with some really top-notch and maybe even the best weekly sales on both corn and soybeans that we've had in quite some time, that was somewhat in the market, as they say, when we had yesterday. But at the same time, the U.S. situation and that we had some cool weather and rainy weather for a week, and then we had kind of an open week, and now we're having another open week, and that's really starting to promote good harvesting here in the U.S. From there, we were supposedly at 8% last week and 6% on beans. I'd say that beans will probably have a chance to be 15 to 18%, and corn probably in the 12 to 15%. I've heard comments about the corn that people have decided that the moisture at this point, particularly this time of year, if you're out there cutting corn at 20, 21%, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And so I think people are kind of backed off on corn a little bit on a progression situation here. But still a very good weekend. We could have some numbers higher than that. It's really interesting. It's been somewhat quiet here on coming from the country on yield expectations.
And are you adjusting your yield expectations for corn?
Somewhat. We had the big adjustment here coming into September. The 81 number was down to 78.5. I think we're going to slip some more on that number. I really haven't got an exact number at this point. From there, I want to see a few more so-called numbers. It's been quite mixed in the West. There's been some good, there's some bad. East is maybe not as top-notch as I've seen it in the past. What few I've seen, and I'd like to, at this point, I think that the trade is kind of on the same boat right now. Not excited about any increase in the number for September, but at the same time, nobody's hearing a complete disaster out there. But there is some places, particularly west of I-35 in Iowa, where there's down 25 to 30% on their soybean yields because of that dryness that happened this summer.
Yes, and how much of the delayed planting in Brazil do you think it's affecting the market right now?
I think it's a background situation. I think it is important. It's a factor that keeps the impact of Brazil's crop coming into the market next spring. But over the years, when we've had not getting much planting done in September and it's been pushed into the first part of October, I think the real deal would be if we don't start to see the monsoonal rains coming in from the Amazon by the 10th to the 15th of October. Man, everybody's going to get excited. The Brazilians and us. So at this point, I think that it's there. It's important. I think the one feature that might have also kind of popped in here on the crops has been the rain that moved into Argentina yesterday and kind of around, and that's given that kind of southern area of Brazil a little bit of moisture. And with La Nina, that's part of the world that's really is the one that's supposed to crank down on moisture, and they have been cranked down to this point. I think this is just a little bit of a blurb on the trend in weather in Argentina and Southern Brazil, and I think that will go back to the kind of classic La Nina impacts that we see around the world from there. And to some extent, we're having the same impact here in the central U.S. because La Nina has a lot better chance of messing us up here in the U.S. So this problem is, will it stay all the way to next summer? Sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, and you say that the September USDA stocks used to be a known event, but right now it's not like that. Why?
Well, it's been quite volatile over the last, well, it started as 2010, happens with the 2008-9 economic situations. We've had dramatic changes in the stocks at the end of the year where the test weights on corn impacted things, varying quality of the grains, so we had some extremely wet corn that got disappeared at the end of the year. Those kinds of things just happened. Interestingly enough, last year's totals that we had on the September report, now some of these might have got adjusted as we went through time because we did have the corn number adjusted on these stocks, and maybe they weren't as dynamic. But the initial reaction was over 207 million on corn, less than expected, and on beans it was like 80 million. Well, you're going back to the late 1990s before you had anything, and even to some extent that first 15 years in there was relatively calm numbers, really. Now after saying all that, are we going to have something like that on Wednesday next week? That's an interesting factor in there. After last year, you got to be a little gun shy, but at the same time, the soybean side of things, we've kind of already sensed that there's going to be an adjustment, be an upward revision in the soybeans because of the previous quarterly reports having very narrow residuals already built in. So the USDA went ahead and actually put in a negative residual in their S&D for 45 million. I don't know if it's going to be a 45 million adjustment higher, but I can see a half a bushel yield increase, which turns out to be close to 38, 39 million. And you put that in there with a little less crush, because the crush was like 4 or 5 million less, and maybe the export's a little bit less. All of a sudden, we are on the the USDA previously was 575 million. I'm guessing 570. Yeah, big deal one way or the other. Corn's a little bit different story.
Yes. Are you seeing any issues for the starting harvest right now?
Issues, not really. We've got such. I think the one key issue will be is this combination in the Western Corn Belt of trying to figure out how to harvest the corn and also moisture content and stuff like that. And I think the twist of it in the corn market is still going to be that stocks report that I didn't kind of left it out there, is the fact that with the kind of things that have happened to us since last spring, we haven't had the kind of ethanol production that creates the DDG. So that gives us a little bit of boost on corn usage. Wheat prices last year versus corn were not that, they were actually sometimes unchanged to lower, and so people looked at wheat as a feed. This year, the other way around, and then just the livestock this year had been postponed on getting into slaughter because of the COVID issues at the slaughterhouses. That all put together, I'm looking for 50 million kind of reduction on the USDA number. When you talk about 2.25 and it's 2.2, well, I don't know. It's another one. But interestingly enough, that was kind of the attitude last year, and things happened. So I guess I'm looking a little less on corn and not much on beans. But we'll find out on Tuesday. That's been one of the more volatile ones we've had over the last few years. So we'll guess it close at that and see what happens next week. Weather, and will the Chinese be back in our pockets here buying some more corn and soybeans? I think that's really important. We got to keep feeding the bull.
Your final words, Jerry?
Well, I have to say that, it's always a little tough when you have a big rally and you start backing off on things here, but I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in this market, and that and the fact that we've got such a aggressive U.S. exporting procedures ahead of us here, I think the basis levels are still going to be pretty strong, and I think there'll be buyers here to try to support this market on setbacks. I don't know how much higher we're going to see. It depends on what kind of yields we get later next week and on through the month of October, and see what that does. Right now, to get a really bull market for $4 on corn, we got to take that corn yield down below 175 and keep our demand going. And that's an interesting situation. And the soybeans a little more interesting there because issues in South America are going to help us if we don't get it planted. And at the same time, what is the yield in the USA? Right now, there's probably a lot better chance for new highs in beans in there and of substantialness than there is maybe in the corn side of things as I see it this time.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. See you next week.
Yes, good to be with you as always, and we look forward to more excitement.